All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited that you all are able to join us today. We're going to give you all a few minutes to kind of join. Hopefully, you can grab your lunch and take a listen to what we have to say today. So, we'll take a minute and let people join, spread the word, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. All right. We will go ahead and jump right into the conversation. I feel like it's always awkward waiting for people virtually a little bit. I see a couple people have joined us. So, good afternoon. My name is Ashley Young. I'm Vice President of Policy and Strategic Initiatives. And today you are joined by the lovely Center for Social Justice team. We're here to talk about Ohio's House Bill 294 and what that means for voting in Ohio. This bill was introduced last Thursday on May 6th. We've seen similar legislation throughout the country suppressing the vote, and so we want to make sure that you have all of the information to make sure that we're able to advocate accordingly for what we know is right, and making sure that we are not suppressing the vote. I want to hand it over to Raquel to introduce the team.
Hi, I am Raquel Smith. Thank you guys for joining us today. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Social Justice at Urban League. We are the advocacy arm of the Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio, where we work with communities and policymakers on police reform and other policy issues that are affecting the residents of our region. I am going to do a round robin with our team so folks can introduce themselves and their role at the center. Let's start off with Kendra.
Hello, everyone. I am Kendra Reeves. I am the social justice advocate here at the Center for Social Justice. And I basically do a lot of work around police reform and accountability here in Southwestern Ohio, but my main focus is data, collecting data from police departments and making sure that that data is publicly available to the community. Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Brown. I am the social justice community organizer, mainly organizing around police reform and accountability as well, getting residents involved in engaging around police reforms.
Popcorn it to Kelly.
Popcorn it to Kelly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Dukes. I am also community organizer for the Center for Social Justice, concentrating on educational equity and education reform for Hamilton County. And I will send it to Jasmine.
Greetings, I am Jasmine Costin. I'm the newbie on the team, and I am the Senior Director of Community Engagement with the Center for Social Justice at the League.
And last but not least, Ashley.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Vice President of Policy and Strategic Initiatives here at the Center for Social Justice, and truly honored to be part of such a dynamic team. So thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. As I mentioned before, today the conversation is really centered around House Bill 294. So we've seen similar legislation throughout the country. So just to provide you a little bit of context, in February of 2020, it was reported that only 35 restrictive bills had been introduced in 15 states. In 2021, it has been reported that there are over 360 bills in around 48 states. So that just gives you a kind of big picture and severity of the issue that we're facing around voter suppression. And so today we want to make sure that Ohioans are informed with proper information and are ready to act. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kendra, and she's going to provide us just an overview of what this House bill is?
So the House Bill 294, and I'm going to share my screen to show you some of the information that we were able to put together and share on our Facebook page. Just so, here we go. Reset, I apologize. But HB House Bill 294 is just like all of the other voter suppression bills that's happening around the nation. And it's basically to restrict access to voting, voting times, ballot boxes, and reducing absentee voting, just because of what happened last year in the 2020 election. And of course, this is going to affect everyone, but it's going to disproportionately affect Black and Brown voters, low-income residents, as well as disabled voters, seniors, students, and active duty military. Excuse me. And so, some of the things, big picture-wise, for Ohio specifically, that's being proposed to be reduced is, eliminating in-person absentee voting before election day. This is important because, as we saw, there was a huge turnout in absentee voting last year, and eliminating this is going to curb that in a significant way. They're also looking at cutting voting hours, reducing the time that people have to request absentee ballots, as well as prohibiting the Secretary of State from sending out prepaid postages. So last year, I don't know about you, but I got a absentee ballot that I did not have to figure out how to buy a stamp to mail. And now they're saying that they don't want this to happen anymore. So again, another barrier for just people in general that may not know how to access stamps. If you're, a younger generation, you may not need stamps anymore, or just low-income residents that don't want to pay for postages. Also, they're increasing the ID requirements. So instead of just one ID requirement, they're looking to increase it to 2, sort of like a 2-step factor authorization. They're also looking to reduce or limit the ability to correct state mistakes on mail-in ballots. So right now there's certain, we're not sure what the mistakes are, but there are certain mistakes that the ballot counters are able to correct, but they're reducing that to lower the threshold, meaning there's going to be less ballots that'll be counted. Also reducing the number of ballot boxes to 1 location per county, and reducing the times that you can actually drop your ballot off in a ballot box, as well as restrict ballot box locations. So this is a lot of information and a lot of things that they're trying to cover and sneak in this bill. So these are the sponsors, and as you can see, they're all Republican. The sponsors and co-sponsors for this bill in Ohio specifically is all Republican. And that says everything that you need to know. So what we're doing for this specific bill is if you can get everyone you know, including yourself, reach out to your Ohio House representative and tell them to vote no on this bill, because if this bill is passed, it's not going to be good for Ohio. And so we actually posted this on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter page. So if you want to figure out how to access or find your representative, we included the link here, which takes you to the district map that you can type in your zip code or your address to figure out who your House representative is, and then you can shoot them an email or call them to tell them to vote no on this bill.
And real quick, I did want to add that although the sponsors of the bill in Ohio are Republican, we are a non-partisan nonprofit organization. So we are definitely just pointing out information to the community that we've received. And I believe, and Ashley, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that most of the voter suppression bills across the country have been introduced or co-sponsored by one party.
Correct. You're correct. Thank you so much, Kendra, for providing that overview. I think it's kind of disheartening when we think about the steps we've taken with voting rights, and we know we still are trying to get a federal bill passed, but to still encounter voter suppression is in 2021 is not okay. And so really, where do we go from here? And so Jasmine, if you can just share a little bit about what can people do? I know a lot of times when it comes to like, okay, a House bill, what is my role? What can I do? People kind of feel like this is not the space for me, but it should be all of our space. And so if you can just share a little bit of advice for folks out there that are looking to kind of get involved.
Absolutely. It's certainly disheartening that we're in 2021 still dealing with this type of voter suppression tactics. But I think that, we should not separate ourselves as the public from what's happening in the state legislature. I think that it is important for us to understand that change happens on a spectrum. And so, like we saw the events of 2020, there were people in the streets, and that's activism. Right now, we are kind of engaging in community education, which is, what is this? How do we get this from the legislature to the people? And so that's why we're here today, is educating you on what is the possibility so that you can organize against it, but also how do we organize around it, right? Like, how do we understand what are the things that are being suggested, and what is the way that we can strategize so that we know how to get our people the correct forms of ID? How do we make sure that we know the timelines for, if this does, God forbid, get passed, how do we know the timelines? How can we make sure that we are organizing around things as well, because we still have power? Then there's also advocacy. We can reach out to people and ask them to speak on our behalf, our representatives, other constituents of the people who are being represented by the people suggesting the bill. Like, this is not good for anyone. Taking access away from voters, access away from voting is not good for anyone, especially not in a country that is built on that. So I think that we can do that by being engaged, by continuing to be educated, and recognizing that these people are speaking for us, and we want them to do the things that we are asking them and voted them in to do.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I think you bring up a really great point. I always tell people it's like leaving the kid at the desk by themselves, or an adult. Like, you'll do your homework for a certain amount of time, and then you start to look around and there's no one there. And so you go off on your own agenda, or somebody else comes in and instructs you to do something different. And so it's really up to us to make sure that we are those teachers, we are those parents, that we are making sure we're holding people accountable and watching the things that they're doing. And if there's things that we don't like, we make sure that we let them know that. So I'm at Tiffany. So if you can just share your thoughts, Jasmine shared a little bit around, where we can go from here, but this whole notion of community organizing and the role of community, if you can just speak to that a little bit.
I think that 2020, we saw the biggest concerted effort of community organizing through the efforts of like Stacey Abrams in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
She was able to, through community organizing and that grassroots, getting the community engaged, constituents engaged in the voting process, she was able to flip 2 Senate seats in Georgia, which was big for our country, So I think that just taking those strategies, like Jasmine said, we have to be strategic in how we're going to move forward. We got to organize around it. How do we make sure that if it does pass, how do we make sure that we have what we need to have so that we can continue in this process and not be disenfranchised, but also just figuring out who our partners are in the legislature, in the Ohio legislature, to vote this bill down. I think that's the most important thing, is getting the community educated on what this bill would actually mean for us. The restriction of early voting times, restricting their access to absentee ballots. I think the community may not really understand, based on our turnout this past in the primary. I think it was like less than 15%. So I think that we just need to get the community educated by platforms like this, getting on social media, spreading the word, sharing it with your Facebook community or whatever community, but getting involved in whether it be your local neighborhood community council, all the way up to the state and federal level.
Thank you so much for that, Tiffany. And you brought up Georgia. And so when I think about Georgia, like you said, we had there were tremendous wins for Georgia, what they saw. And so Raquel, if you can kind of just speak to, we talked about the role of community. There's corporations and there's other folks. And so what's the role of this entire kind of ecosystem when we think about voter suppression? You know, I think about what happened in Georgia with the Major League Baseball and things like that. And so if you can speak to like the larger community in general, and what type of role could they potentially play?
Well, want to take us back again to last summer. There was a lot of grassroots organizing and what I like to call the unusual suspects that were protesting against police brutality across the country. What we saw from there is that there were many companies, both nonprofit and for-profit entities, putting out statements denouncing the brutality against George Floyd, but also lifting up and talking about systemic racism and its impact on not just Black and Brown communities, but our entire country. And then you have several states and cities across the country declaring racism as a public health crisis. And the big question was, okay, where do we go from there? We want to see the corporations that issue statements last summer really not just work on their internal structure, but affect policy change, because we know that they're influencers. Money gives you influence, right? What happened in Georgia was really interesting because the Georgia voter suppression bill sort of passed under the radar, it felt like. And there wasn't much, I would say, publicity around it until it was coming up for a vote. And then after it passed, and they have an interesting story. This was actually chronicled in the Washington Post in a story just that came out last week. There were two Black CEOs who took it upon themselves to really gather folks together, to bring Black businesses together, large corporations, and let them know and sort of educate them on the fact that this is not just a Black or Brown people issue, right? This is something that affects us all in our entire democracy. And after a series of exchanges, as I understand, with some top CEOs from companies like Delta Airlines, like you mentioned, Major League Baseball, Target, and Microsoft, those entities also decided to put out their own statement denouncing any type of voter suppression across the country. And I think that there is a huge role particularly here in Ohio, to be more proactive instead of waiting until something has passed, to stand behind what you see grassroots organizers fighting for, and to say that we denounce any type of voter suppression. I think that business leaders can also influence folks on a one-to-one basis, right? They are in circles that a lot of times grassroots organizers, policy advocates, etc., they're in rooms that we don't get invited to. And that is where we need the discussion to happen, because like I said, money equals influence. As much as we don't want that to be the case, we know that it is. And the one thing that I will lift up to any local corporate partners or entities in Ohio is that, again, this is not just a Black or Brown issue. Restricting absentee voting will also affect those who live in rural areas. especially considering the fact that they won't have access to as many ballot boxes. It will affect seniors, which we've already seen the disproportionate effect that the pandemic had on seniors and their ability to vote. Students who are, temporarily out of state, active duty military folks rely on absentee voting. So to tell them that they will have now less time and less opportunity to be able to submit their vote is a problem. So I think that this is something that will touch, literally, if it doesn't touch you personally, it will touch your family. And this is something that Ohio does not want nor need. I would urge all of our corporate entities that are located in Ohio, particularly Southwestern Ohio, to consider taking a public stance against this voter suppression bill. I think that at this point, we're sending out a call to action to you as well. We need your influence in order to protect our vote.
I'm taking down all these notes because gems are dropped today. So I think that's like really a mic drop on that one. And so, when we think about the work that needs to be done, I think Raquel laid out the call to action very well to our corporations and to us as individuals. And so, take this information today, share it with your friends, share it with your family, have conversation around it, and make sure you contact your elected official. If you are head of a company, corporation, entity, really start to think about when, we talk about having equitable organizations, this is an action that your organization can do to show how equitable you are. And so we really urge you to use your power and influence to make a difference and really take a stand. And so we're going to put up real quick the information, and we'll also drop it in the chat for you to contact your representatives. If you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat, and we'll take a look at it, and we'll make sure that we get back to you on answering those. But really, it's up to all of us. Like Raquel said, this affects the young, the old, everybody in between. And if we truly want to say that we are a democracy, we have to make sure that we are protecting the right to vote. And so the ball is in all of our courts today. When we come back and have this conversation, I want to know, how many people did you share this information with? How many people did you make sure that they contacted their representatives? Again, this is about accountability. We elect people to office, and we can't let them just go to Columbus and sit idly. We need to make sure that they understand what's important to us. And today, we want you all to know that voting is important to us. It should be important to you. And so make sure that you're sharing this information. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll be sure to answer them.